Welcome to Driving Growth, the go-to-market podcast for traditional B2B businesses that are looking to build systems to create predictable revenue growth. In short, turning their company into a revenue factory. I'm your host, Steve Whittington, president of Roadmap and a believer in one simple truth. Sustainable growth is not an accident, it's engineered, and my company Roadmap is a builder of go-to-market systems. This is a special edition of Driving Growth in which we have three amazing, remarkable sales leaders on, and we're going to be debating topics today of what we see happening in the future about what needs to stop in sales, shifting in buyers' expectations, what's making a comeback, and the path forward for sellers. But before we do that, we're going to get these folks to introduce themselves, and the challenge for them is to introduce themselves very briefly. And as sales leaders, we know everybody likes to talk. So I'm going to pick one and then they're going to start. So we'll start with the top of my Brady Bunch thing. George, you get to go first. Introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Steve. I'm George Leith. I'm the president of international partnerships for AdCellerant.
There we go. He accomplished it. Leslie, you're next.
Yeah, George dialed it in. Hi, folks. I'm Leslie Venetz. I'm the founder of the Sales-Led Go-to-Market Agency, was a 4-time head of sales before that. And I just published my first book, Profit Generating Pipeline, as a USA Today Top 50 bestseller. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And it's a good read. I'm starting to dive into it. I love it. Robbie, you're next.
Awesome. Robbie Butchart. I am the VP of Growth for North America for a company called Blackbook.AI. Started a software development company, employee one ground up, scaled it to about 50 people, and also have my own growth-based consultancy where I help organizations with their overarching go-to-market growth strategy.
Okay, so we are going to have lots of expertise in this debate today. So I want to start with what needs to stop in selling. And all of us in some way, shape, or form have received probably daily a bad buyer's experience from sellers that just maybe don't know what they're doing or are holding on to outdated tactics. Buyers are more informed now than they ever have been. They're more self-directed. They're more self-serving. They're really less tolerant of bad sales tactics and experiences. And as leaders, we need to ask how we get our sellers to adapt to what actually is the modern sales process. So to start with that, though, what needs to stop? And I'm going to get Robbie to go first and say, hey, this is what I see. This is my biggest pain point, what I see in selling, what needs to stop today. So Robbie, take it away.
Yeah, I think we all can relate to what I'm about to say here. I'm excited to see heads start to nod with the LinkedIn debacle that it has become. You get a connection, the immediate connection goes into a pitch. And you can tell it's all generated through the new tools that exist out in the market today, which can be very powerful. My favorite is when I get hi, insert name, and then they have in the actual outreach. So that's always a big like, oh, I just want to throw stuff. So like it's just that lack of human connection that goes into the spray and pray approach, and they think that the numbers game is what's ultimately going to drive value, and that's just not the case at all. So I think that's the thing that needs to stop, and I don't know why. I'm surprised people. I mean, you think it's got to be working because they keep doing it. Like, I don't know who's buying that. I don't know. So I'm shocked that it's continuing. Like, I had one this morning and at least my name was in there. That was a win, but it's the same concept. And it's just a complete garbage dump in what they do and no connection at all. So I think that's the biggest thing that's a detriment in the market that I'm seeing. That's a quick win we can all relate to.
Yeah. Leslie, what are your thoughts on that spray and pray?
My head was nodding, Robbie, because I think we've all been victims of the old like connect and spam on LinkedIn. And I might take it a step further because cold outbound really is my specialty right now. That's what I'm working with the majority of my clients on. And it doesn't work. But the trap that happens is we'll send, say, not me, but people will send, say, like 30,000 emails and they'll get 30 responses. So they'll say, hey, I got 30,000 responses, and they're missing the part where they burned 20,000 bridges on the way to get those 30,000 responses. So I think it works as that like short-term silver bullet strategy. it absolutely and unequivocally does not work long term, and it also like deeply tarnishes the profession of sales because it erodes so much trust on the way to get those few quick wins. So big, huge +1 to that. And I think like what I would like to see sellers and sales leaders stop doing related to that is trying to talk to everybody with the same generic message, because when we try to reach everybody, we end up speaking to nobody. So the sort of focus on that like quantity approach really undercuts our ability to write relevant messaging that actually resonates with buyers and like earns the right to their attention and to their action.
George, thoughts on that?
Well, I definitely agree with Leslie and Robbie. I got another one though. We got to stop winging it. And what I mean by that is our buyers are more sophisticated and are doing more research than they've ever done. And I'm just finding that I'll probably say something off color, but it wouldn't be a podcast with me if I didn't. But pulling it out of your ass just doesn't work anymore. It actually, again, goes to reputation. When I'm dealing with a salesperson and I get pinged a lot by the spam because of title, it's like, did you do any research at all? And your value props are weak if you're talking to this persona. It's like one size is not fitting all anymore. We have the ability to be more personalized than we ever have. Be more thoughtful. And I'm doing a lot of coaching right now in the role that I'm in with veterans that are getting used to new companies, and some of the things that we've been debating as a group, and they're coaching me on it as well, is really digging into the value propositions of a new organization. I've been with this company for about 9 months, and it's a very sophisticated and it's a very cluttered space. So sometimes you're successful by what you don't do rather than what you do, and really making your world small, getting really good at it, figuring out that very valuable ICP that you can do a great job with, and then expand. That's difficult for me because I want to conquer the world, and I always have, but really getting that focus, I think, is where a lot of reps struggle. And what's happening is trying to go in and be all things to all people, or I'll figure it out while I'm on the call, and I'll just be the community. It just doesn't work anymore because the buyers are just smarter.
Yeah. So like to summarize, we say, listen, don't do like mass spamming outreach. Also be prepared, be very specific as to who you're trying to sell to, understand what your value prop is to that specific ICP, and dial in and get better and better and better at it. Right. And there's no excuse for being lazy and not preparing for this kind of stuff. And so that is one of my things is I get people trying to sell to me, and I'll take certain meetings, and then I show up and they don't know anything about me. And I'm like, well, there's so many tools out there. Like, just like, even like, you don't know anything about me. Like, I'm everywhere. Like, like it doesn't take much to figure like at least one thing. Mm-hmm. Right. And so like that's my biggest thing is if I take a meeting and they're not even prepared, don't know my organizations, like, yeah, that's a big thing. But the other thing that I see happening is and this is maybe a future thing, but it's like maybe something that we have to talk about that needs to stop, is the comeback of full cycle sales. And so like the other thing that is an annoyance for me, and I will maybe get your thoughts on it, is like that gatekeeper, like you have to go to the next person, you have to go to the AE and stuff like that. And from a buyer's perspective, it's like to go through all these hoops, like it seems like this is something that is just unnecessary. So I'm going to start with George on that, because I know you've ran a big organization that had a lot of that structure in place. And so what's your thoughts about the various different gated stages and that in the selling process moving forward?
Yeah, that's a huge question that has a lot of answers to it, because I think what we really have to understand is it's not just vertical. When we're approaching an ICP, that can be pretty big as well. And then we have vertical, and then we have size. And all of those buyers have a little different process. And by the way, some of them we don't even know if they're buyers yet, right? Because we don't even know if we have a fit for the problem that they have. So if it's a more sophisticated sell where it requires deeper discovery, then you're going to have to just go deeper. You're going to spend more time on it. You might have numerous, we've got a lot of buy committee in the role that I'm in now. Used to be able, you just get on the call with the head of revenue and you say, hey, I can help you make more money. And the head of revenue would sign the contract and you'd be off to the races. In the deep, dark world of programmatic display advertising, you've got procurement, you're going to have the head of IT, you might have the head of compliance. And by the way, that's on both sides. Because I've got a head of engineering that's going to have to get on the call with their head of IT. I've got a head of compliance on our side is going to have to get on. So, there's in that type of an enterprise sale where you've got numerous people on both sides of the desk, you're not going to be able to hand it off. You're going to have somebody that quarterbacks the deal all the way through. If the deal is smaller, then you could have an SDR motion that could go get 5 of them lined up for the BDR to go in and have the conversation. Whether you need that SDR to actually breathe air, or maybe they use a chip to power themselves, that remains to be seen. I have some friends that are using AI SDRs right now, and they're doing a great job of. And by the way, what is an SDR's job? It's to help people not waste their time. It's to help the buyer not waste their time, and it's to help the seller not waste their time. So, that's a huge loaded question in my opinion. I think that it depends on the size, it depends on the vertical, it depends upon the complexity of the sale. That's the way that I feel.
Yeah, that's great, valid points. I think there are some people that are sticking to that gated process a little too much because Salesforce pushed it out into the world and then everybody just kept doing it. But to your point, it's nuanced and, do the full cycle sales when it needs to be and then appropriate for different types of things. Robbie, your thoughts on that? You've and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, it's I totally agree with George. Like it's such a big conversation. I think, I'll speak to maybe my experience that I'm in over the last, let's call it decade here, where like when we're building software for organizations or we're selling, an AI outcome-based solution, you have to have the full cycle. Like, first of all, it's starting with trust, right? First conversation that we have, like in growing something. So let's speak to, either smaller organizations or organizations that are expanding into new marketplaces. When you do it this way, you start with like a 3-lane approach is the way that I kind of think about it, is like, okay, I have my network, immediate conversations. Those are people that I've trust, that we've got relationships that we've won and I've helped support. It's a great mutually beneficial. And most times they're friends that they evolve into, from clients into friends. The second lane gets into from like a partnership model. How do you create partnerships within to help support some of the sales activity? And then you've got a whole account-based marketing strategy approach, which to me is the outbound. That's the way I classify it, is like account-based marketing is I'm tactically looking at organizations that I want to support because I know we can help them, because we've helped with solve similar problems with similar industry organization in the past. So there's your 3 lanes. And when you look at it this way, in an ideal world, you have people targeting their network and going after it. Then you have people that are managing the partnerships and going and finding all of that. And then you have your account-based marketing strategy with an actual tactical marketing team that's going after that. That's not all reasonable to think about in the earlier stages. If you're advanced, yeah, you're going to have that. You're going to have leads. You're going to have execution. You'll have SDRs. You'll probably have BDRs in some situations, and you'll evolve and leverage those models to ultimately get to that outcome of building a full pipe and then moving through the cycle. That being said, from a tactical enterprise or mid to large, you're going to need to be full cycle. I don't think you can start I hate that feeling. I don't know if anybody else likes that feeling. You start with one, they're like, all of a sudden you get flipped over to somebody else. I'm like, oh, this sucks. I feel like a number. I don't like that. I don't like that feeling. And sales is all about how you make people feel, right? When it really is really what it comes down to. So when the growth piece comes together, having the ability to tactically go after that full scale start to finish And even after it's in a production ready environment, still being there and meeting quarterly. I like quarterly innovation reviews. I don't like QBRs. That's like super old school. So I like the innovation stuff, right? So for me, that's the way I like to think about these things. But you're still present, you're still involved. So you're maybe not the lead on it in those points, but you're still involved every step of the way. And the client relationship is stronger because they see you and they see your presence. So I think that's now product and transactional B2C, you're very different conversations to be had. And to, George's point earlier, this topic could be a podcast in itself because there's so many components. So, just speaking from my experience and where I'm seeing, wins because of the model, that's it's got to be the full experience.
Leslie, what's your thoughts on, riffing on what Robbie and George have been talking about and unpacking there?
Yeah, when you asked the question, Steve, what I heard was, how do we organize our teams in a way that allows us to build sales processes or buying processes that both reduce friction for our buyers and also allow us to expedite that trust building or that rapport building. And I came up as an ISR, an inside sales rep in a transactional environment, managing the full cycle, like literally the prospecting, the setting meeting, the running the cycle, the closing the deal, and then managing the deal. But I've also been an AE with SDR alignment, and I've managed as ISRs, AEs, SDRs. So I have the perspective both from the sales leader lens and also from the individual contributor lens. And I still deeply believe that the SDR to AE model works, but it's often overused. And it got overused in that growth at all costs era where money was kind of free and we didn't have to worry about, or I shouldn't say we, because this is never my belief, but companies in general at that time were a lot less worried about their reps getting to quota and the amount of revenue individual contributors were bringing in. And instead, they were just throwing more bodies at revenue to try to bridge those gaps. And a lot of that meant that they were hiring SDRs to try to just get as many meetings into the funnel as possible. So as somebody that loves the full cycle AE role, I think it's an incredible role, and who also understands the pitfalls of over-indexing on SDRs, I still think it's a great and important role. It's just not necessary in a lot of those more transactional sales environments. But what I would say is that I love using an SDR type employee to do a lot of the prospecting work. Because if we think about how much a good AE costs, I do not want that person whose core expertise is running middle and bottom of funnel to also be manually going through a list to make sure people are qualified and doing all that minutia, because it's not that those are not important tasks. They simply don't need to be done at somebody that I'm paying that much money for. So I love seeing the more sales assistant roles, or a really popular title recently is GTM engineer. So folks that can kind of bridge the gap between sales and RevOps, use a tool like Clay or Zoom Info to bring in some of that intelligence with the data and expedite the work that a really great AE can do.
Right. Senior seller for sure. So that's to George's point. What's the role of an SDR, right? To save everybody time and remove friction from the process. So, so this leads into where these buyer expectations are shifting. So we talked about things that we want to see stopping, right? We want to stop the spamming. We want to stop not being prepared. We want to stop not having inappropriate steps, really just aligned to your buyer expectations. So now we're going to talk about buyers' expectations. So I'll start with Leslie. What do you see evolving from the buyer's perspective, moving forward here into 2026? What's happening?
Yeah, a few things. I think one is that our buyers have zero tolerance for not having easy access to pricing if you have a flat rate product. And that used to be something that was pretty best practice even 5-6 years ago, where you wouldn't necessarily have your pricing on your website. And now if you're selling a SaaS product where you have like it costs what it costs, and you're not making it super, super easy for prospective customers to access that. Like if you're gating pricing by making them talk to a seller first, they're done. Like I know many buyers that will not buy with you out of principle if that's like the mentality, that's the way you operate. I think that's a really big one. And like maybe related to that is that buyers' patience with shitty sales calls is just at an all-time low. And there was some Gartner data that came out that ruffled everybody's feathers, and it was something along the lines of like 72% of B2B buyers would prefer a sales rep free experience. But if you dig into the data, they're not actually saying that they don't want to work with and get supported by sales reps. Knock-on data says that folks that didn't work with a sales rep are significantly more likely to regret their decision. But the expectation that we need to keep top of mind going into 2026 is that if we are not showing up to these calls prepared with insights, with a point of view, if we are not making sure, like I talk a lot about earning the right, if we are not asking ourselves before we send that email, show up to a discovery call, ask for a buying decision, what have I done to earn the right to make this ask of the buyer? And we don't have a really compelling answer to that shows that we have been thoughtful and strategic and led with insight and led with value, they're going to stop taking our calls.
Right. Yeah. And so that's a really good counterpoint that you said, because I read that exact same data point, right? But it really, it's more of a reflection on the sellers than it is on what the buyers need. Yeah. And the interesting thing is there's also another data point that in most organizations, 80% of your revenue comes from about 17% of your sellers. So the question is, what is the other 80% doing? It's that 80-20 rule, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, and what is the experience that they're providing and all that stuff, right? And so George, why don't you go next talking about this and riffing off of like just shifting buyer expectations, because there's a lot that Leslie said that you could unpack and support and dive into.
Yeah, no, you have to agree with that statement, because I don't have to put up with a shitty seller because there's pretty much everything has numerous people that are playing in the space. And while we all think that we have the best solution, we don't. And a lot of times, whatever solution that we do offer needs to have that experience that's attached to it. And, I love when somebody presents all of their great value. One of the questions that I like to ask is, what happens when something goes wrong? How are you going to handle it? Because it's going to happen. I sold for a long time, coached sellers for a long time, and then for a couple of years, I was the buyer, and I got payback. And it was amazing. And I've actually had to apologize to some of those groups because I was just a dick, and really dug deep. And it was a very interesting situation because I also have learned over the years how to become somewhat technical in those components, and just eviscerated some sales reps that were not ready to have a technical conversation with a buyer. It was very fascinating to me. In the role that I'm in now, that's where I brought up earlier about the CTO or the CIO or the compliance officer, or a whole bunch of personas that you're sitting across the table from that you would not have sat across the table from, and you can't sell them. They're worse than CFOs. And if you're not able to run plays with them that touch them, you're dead in the water. Because there will be someone else that comes in that does have those personas either ready to be on a call or at the table at the time. Leading up to this, I was with a group, I was with the CEO of the group that I've really admired over the years called Yext. And the way that they do their enterprise sales, and we're talking where they walk into Bank of America and they're dealing with, a multi-8-figure deal and a 3-year contract, that they would bring an army of data scientists. And I'm just like, I don't even know how the hell a sale like that would work, because it's so outside of what I was used to. But there's so much technical that's going on right now that we've got to get used to that. And again, I'm talking about B2B for sure. So I do like that play of, yeah, your solution's great, but what happens when it's not great?
Right. And so you need that complete transparency and have that whole team to back it up. And you said you can't. So basically the buyers are expecting you not to be selling to them, but to be able to answer those types of questions. So Robbie, what are you seeing with this whole shifting buyer behavior as well?
First of all, I would like to point out, and I needed some sort of hero cookie for this, I was not the first one to swear. Okay? So Leslie, George, I appreciate you guys. I've been holding back. I'm like so proud of myself, and then you guys both dropped it. I'm like, yes,
Steve carefully curated this group of people.
Yeah. This is great. This is great. Now I'm like, okay, now we're going. Here we go. Just had to throw that out there. Yeah, I had to throw that out there.
Well played.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Again, these are such big topics, and I think when we take a step back and look at it from multiple lenses, there's concepts of product, SaaS, and then there's concepts of managed service or consulting services, hardware component. Like there's so many different topics within the cycles to talk about that are going to vary for people depending on what they're doing. So when I think of product, like SaaS, hardware, Leslie, 100% agree with you. I had a little stint in a product company prior to jumping into where I am with Blackbook. And that actually was like legit a thing. They were like, why is your pricing not? They actually went out of their way to reach out, why is your pricing not online? Like, you guys, like, what the hell? And so like it pissed them off to the point where like, I'm going to find somebody else. To George's point, there's somebody else doing it just as well, if not better. So like it's a thing, right? And so I think in addition to that, is the direct-to-consumer concept. I don't want to talk to anybody. I think there is depth and reality there when it comes to the D2C experience, where I just want to go online because everything is here now. I want to go online. I want to buy my book. I want to, Leslie, I'm going to buy your book. I'm going to do it on Amazon after this. I don't want to talk to anybody. I talk to you. You're nice, but I'm saying we're removing that concept and that everybody's so busy. So D2C, I think, is something that is a must. There's some organizations that still aren't doing that, but I think you're missing a big piece of the puzzle. And there's actually some data, which I don't have handy off the top of my head. I wasn't expecting to talk about this. That helps support that conversation. Getting into my area and where I live daily, supporting teams and also selling is, I think we have to think of these engagements, the true professionals. Like there's sales reps, there's BDRs, there's SDRs, but there's the sales professional. And like this is what we do. And when we think about that from the buyer's standpoint, they're investing time in you. Why? Like think about that. Like you want to go and sell some stuff. They want to get educated. They want to learn. They want, to George's point, is tell me how this shit's going to blow up. Because it's technology, most likely there's going to be problems. How are you going to deal with it? What happens if the business closes? What happens if the code goes wrong? What happens if support's not there? So we have to educate these people rather than trying to sell them something. We need to educate them on what their experience is. That's right, Leslie, you get it. The reality of it is we need to help them walk down that path because there's so much information that's out there. There's so much shiny object syndrome that's going on. Everybody's technology is AI now. We got AI. No, you don't. You don't. So why are you saying that? There's lying. There's blasphemy at some degrees out there. Like this is a pretty passionate subject for me. In case you're not picking up on that. So I think when we take a step back and be like, okay, I'm going to go meet with George. I need to educate him on what we're seeing in the marketplace. I need to understand what his pain points are, what his problems are, what his initiatives are moving into the coming year. And sometimes that information is not available. So tactically, we need to think of, okay, what's a similar industry? Is there information on that industry? Hey, George, your biggest competitor is having this challenge. How are you dealing with that? George is going to have okay, this guy's done a little bit of research. Okay, he's a good looking fella. I'm going to meet with him. That's my own compliment back to me, George, just an FYI. So the way that, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So when we bring in education, and because they are investing time with us, we can have a different hat on when we're thinking it that way. If you don't buy anything from me, you're going to learn. You're going to get educated. There's going to be stuff you can take away and you can have in your conversations with your executive team, your board, whoever the case may be, to make you then look like a rock star. And so that might not immediately translate into some sort of deal, but you could be better. You're pretty certain that you're going to be represented better than most because you've been able to do that. And the tactical components to that, I have a 3-3-3 rule. 3 minutes to research the person, 3 minutes to research the company, 3 minutes to research the role. If you're not finding too much on the company, go to competitors. So add a third. And it's enough to be dangerous. It's enough to be, intelligent in your conversation. And if you're having a larger cycle and you're having a larger experience from what you sell and what the client's going to get, expand that. Don't just stay in the threes, because you're gonna get called out real quick. Like when George is wearing "I'm a dick" hat. Like that's gonna get called out real quick in those situations, and you don't want to be like that, right? So I really made up for the swearing on that one. I'm really proud of myself, guys. So
you did bring up a good point, though, that when you're dealing with a buyer that then has to go sell it internally, so you get their buy-in, you've got to give them enough so they can go have that conversation. Yeah. And especially at that enterprise level, you've got an internal sale so that the thing that you just committed to over a 2-year contract actually gets used, or it's going to impact your brand. But then it might end up at a board meeting. And you've got to have that until it going, all our competitors are in this space, or here's how some other organizations have increased their EBITDA. Now, that's a hell of a lot different conversation than I can drive your revenue up by 12% or save you some money. And so again, we get back to it depends upon the size and it depends upon the complexity of the solution.
In my last corporate role before I left to do my own thing, I was selling to Fortune 500 chief procurement officers.
Oh.
That's the correct
that just
reaction.
makes my ass
for
up,
that. But to your point, George, if you did not have a strategy for champion enablement and like an understanding that they were going to have to expend some of their internal social capital to get this deal done for both of you, you were dead in the water. Like the deal was not going to move forward at these Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
To break it down from a simple perspective, like software as a service and tech is as far as the tip of the spear when I look at, I'm going to say that the modern sales methodology, and so it's out front, right? And I focus on supporting traditional B2Bs and taking all that stuff and then putting into like somebody that sells a piece of equipment to an ag dealership kind of thing, right? But the same kind of principles hold. And, you folks are talking enterprise sales. One of these pieces of equipment can be $450,000, that sort of thing. So it's not small ticket numbers, right? So you got to think about this kind of stuff. But what we're hearing is just simple stuff. Like, don't go out and spray and pray. Be prepared. Actually, so I heard a few things that I really like is like the selling process is always designed from the seller's point of view as opposed to the buyer's point of view. It's like, it's not a discovery call. It's actually educating the customer, and it's like client education. And so like, it really like, it's still like we design sales processes for organizations as part of what we do. And I find there's still like, this is our sales process. I'm like, well, what is the buying process? Why don't you design your sales process to match the buying process or what the buyer needs? And so it's really like, if we're going to fix what's going wrong in selling, it's getting rid of some of that obvious stuff. It's actually paying attention to what the client needs and expects and serving them, and then having appropriate resources for the appropriate different levels of selling. And so like to enterprise sales, to like stuff that's like, kind of like a D2C, because there is a bunch of B2B stuff that is, they just want the price and they want to go, right? So I'm going to go back to Robbie though. When we think about what's going on, and we talked about what kind of has to stop and then our shifting buyer expectations, I see a bunch of stuff in what I would call the professional selling realm. So we're all professional sellers. This is our profession. So what's making a comeback? What is what's old and is now gold, right? Like what should never went away. So Robbie, what's making
phone calls, baby?
Yeah, 100%.
It's really it's like I love it because we talk so much about, well, this AI, like I think it came up earlier. I can't remember who mentioned. I think I'm George, the AI SDRs and how like Zoom Info and Apollo, and we're gonna do sequencing and we're gonna like blast them on LinkedIn, and oh my gosh, everybody hates it. And I'm very curious, George, on the AI SDR. I want to take that offline with you. I want to pick your brain on that a little bit. But like old school is the new school, man. Like the phone call. I talk to so many people because they're so overwhelmed. I'm like, I always ask, like to your point of the buyer experience, Steve. I always ask all my clients, like when people are reaching out to you, what are you actually responding to? You know, like that's a great question for everybody that's listening. And just to remind everybody, go ask your clients when they actually will engage with somebody that reaches out to them. I think you'll be fascinated how many people are actually picking up the phone these days, and it's working for me. Having some good conversations with people. People are answering the phone again. I don't think everybody is. I also think it depends on your industry. I think it depends on the roles. So so take that with a bit of grain of salt. But the phone is working. What I'm also seeing, and what we actually built a campaign around at the previous company I was supporting there for a bit, was like mailers. When was the last time you got like a cool mailer? Like outside of Amazon, I mean, we all get Amazon, but like outside of that, like when was the last time you got a cool mailer? You know, like, and what if it was like a little, like, I don't know, like trinkets or something that aligns to the business, aligns to a problem, makes them think a little bit, be like, oh, this is cool. I got a package. Like everybody likes a package, you know, comes to your doorstep. Ooh, what do I get from Amazon today? I'm not sure which order this is, you know? And then we think if things actually get delivered to an office, you know, if you can send something that's non-branded, that's a big thing. Don't brand your stuff. You're right. No, because when was the last time you wore somebody else's branded like golf shirt or whatever? I don't. So like it's a thing. There's some data around that to support it too, where it's like you actually do the research. Nobody must wear branded. They'll remember who sent it, and that's all it matters at the end of the day. So you know, it's so we actually did that. Put a whole campaign together. Put little like keys inside of this like cool black box. They were like old school keys, and it was just to trigger. Hey, when I reach out to you on LinkedIn or when I call you next week. Oh yeah, this guy, and it worked. Like we did it a couple of times. A couple people called back, which was nuts. A few people replied in LinkedIn, which was crazy. You know, like so you're getting these conversations because of the mailers that go out. And again, that's the old school. I think COVID really did us a disservice by just dropping in on clients. You know, we always used to hey, I'm just in your neighborhood, and you know, like you stop by, even if you stop by and just drop off a coffee. You know, or a book or whatever, those things, they matter to people. It's the white of the eyes concept, right? So getting back in front of people, there's receptiveness to that these days. So I would say those three things are where I'm seeing, you know, some traction again in tactical, you know, moving the needle exercises. So, but phone calls, man, get on it.
I agree 100%. And Leslie, you got to go next. I mean, this is your realm. So
yeah.
Jump in.
You know, I love to hear somebody advocating for cold calls. There's so many ways I can go. Before I talk about cold calls, I don't know if you can see it, but this like little desk behind me here are literally gifts from people. I have like a piñata that somebody sent me. I have like a cute little placard that says my name and it says GTM boss, right? So they were like very thoughtful pieces. Like I think one was sent to me by Sendoso, another was sent by a client that I like did an extra favor for. But those are great ways to get attention. Like one of the things that I would really, really emphasize for anybody doing outreach right now is make sure you're using a minimum of 3 channels. And the way that I think about this is I use the term channel of choice. And what I often hear reps say, sometimes even sales leaders, is like, well, I prefer LinkedIn. I don't like to make cold calls. It is not about you. It is about using at least 3 channels because you are then giving your prospects the opportunity to engage with you on their preferred channel, their channel of choice. So always do a minimum of 3. There's so much data that shows that like 3+, you really like unlock kind of exponential gains. Clearly, you know, phone, some sort of social, probably LinkedIn and email are the best, but I've also had a lot of luck with some sort of direct mail, even if it's handwritten notes. And I'm building a lot of sequences for clients around events where we do outbound before the event. And then assuming most people, they won't actually get to meet at the event, then we continue the sales-led outbound instead of just like a generic marketing email. So I love all of that. But one thing that I will say about phone, first, it works. Like just because maybe you, the person making the phone calls, don't answer phone calls, that doesn't matter. Like the data shows it works. People are picking up. But what I think people miss is that they hear cold calls and they literally only think of using the phone as a channel for the call. And what they're really underutilizing is taking a strategic approach to their voicemails. to being thoughtful about where the phone calls and the voicemails fall within their sequences and within the other channels. So instead of being like, hey, it's Leslie from my company and this is what we do, call me back. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to call you back. You can reference that LinkedIn touch point or that piece of mail you sent or that value-led email. So you're increasing engagement throughout the entire sequence. And one thing that I started adding into all of my sequences just as recently as a couple of weeks ago is call screening scripts for the new iOS on iPhone. And, once again, people are like, cold calling's dead. I think it's actually another incredible opportunity to get our, trust awareness around what problems we can solve in front of our prospect, because it shows up on your phone as a push notification. Do you want to know what the open rates are on push notifications? So it's, right. So it's always like, oh, this is dead, that's dead. And I agree with Robbie that both what is old is new again, because really it never went away. People just got distracted by shiny objects. But please remember that when we say things like make cold calls or send direct mailers, we're not saying just do that in a vacuum. Make sure that it is part of a multi-channel strategic plan to do outreach.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I leverage the fact that all voicemails get pushed to text eventually or totally. I've done a complete sale through leaving voicemails, and they've emailed me back and it's like, yeah, got your voicemails, read all your notes, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, ready to sign.
Totally.
had the initial
transcribed, and most people now read voicemails instead of listen to them.
Yeah. So I'm very aware of that and just make sure that I'm presenting myself properly because they're going to be reading what I'm saying.
I love that.
So it's a great touch.
Just to add one thing, sorry, before we go into that, just to double down on one thing Leslie said for people, and I think that the big thing where we have this misconception of it's not working is your messaging. And we've said that it's been a common theme through this entire podcast has been messaging and your ICP. So if it's not working, check your messaging, right? Double down on the value and the outcome that you help them solve for. And that messaging, then as you tweak it and go, you'll see an increase in your ability to convert in those situations. So that's where I would challenge people that are getting blockers around that is to double check that.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing that I see making a comeback because of what COVID did, we didn't have any any personal interaction. Of course, is that FaceTime. And George, you're the master at that. And I just think it's so important. I was just at an event. I'd been going to the event since 2000, so over 25 years, and I haven't been there for about 8 years. And I'm walking through the halls and I know everybody. I'm just mad at myself for not actually making the effort to have that FaceTime with my ICP when it's, you just have to get out there. And so, George, why don't you talk about that? Because you're traveling back from doing just like that. You make sure that you do FaceTime literally all over the world. And then also riff on what Leslie and Robbie are saying.
It's a massive investment to be able to do it, first off. And I will tell you that now having been on both sides of the desk where you got to justify the investments even more, where you're doing zero-based budgeting, you're trying to get to profitability and things like that. One of the plays that I'm probably more focused on now is determine your outcome before you go on the tour, and be really focused on what those outcomes are going to be, because at some point in time, someone's going to say, okay, we dropped 25 grand. What do we get out of that? I was literally on stand-up, the corporate stand-up before this call, and I was asked by the CEO, so you gotta give him the straight goods where I was in the world, and I had to tell him I was in Reykjavik on a stopover. So now the entire company thinks that this trip was a holiday for me. And so you gotta have that outcome defined. And the other way to really justify the trip is to make it a part of your content strategy. So there have been numerous LinkedIn posts and X posts that are out there, and there are lots of pictures with customers. And don't just have that on your phone and leave it there. That now becomes part of the strategy. And I've had lots of friends that have kind of, it's not something that I came up with. It's people, the annoying person at the event that's like, hey, we got to get a selfie. And it's like, yeah, you got to get a selfie, and then you've got to do something with it. I love that Leslie and Robbie had talked about the term that I've heard used, and I love this term, is putting heat around the prospect. And that heat around the prospect can't just be LinkedIn, and it can't just be email, and it can't just be phone calls, and it can't just be social. It needs to be the entire strategy. And then the content needs to line up with that as well. So as an individual contributor, or as somebody leading an organization, or somebody responsible for go-to-market, having that strategic approach to your content and then disseminating that content on multiple channels has never been more important. But then the ability to measure it, this is where I'm going to weave it back, to measure it, to show a quantifiable ROI. And we are in a realm right now where you need to be able to prove that the things that you're doing gave you a return on investment. Now, if we just take that back to being an individual contributor, because some of what I'm doing right now in building out an international business unit is I'm actually doing old school, just George selling shit. And let me tell you, that has caused this bag of cats to be in all sorts of problems, because I'm doing my own pipeline review and I'm calling out my own bullshit. And like that, I'll tell you, that has caused more anxiety than I ever knew, because I'm over here going, okay, I got to put my pipeline together so that I can talk to the other sales leaders. And I'm like, that deal's bullshit. Yep. I think it's going to happen, but I can't tell you when it's going to happen. And by the way, in my mind, I'm the greatest sales guy ever, and I'm going to get that deal. By the way, there is a prospect out there I've been trying to get for 10 years. I'm still trying to get them, and one day I will get them. So, my point to all that is, again, back to you can't fake it anymore. You have to have a plan. You have to have a strategy. You have to have steps to it. You have to disqualify the things that aren't working, and then you have to be able to prove that it gave you some ROI.
Yeah.
Can I pull out one more quick theme that I saw? Sure. Because I think it's quite impressive. I mean, I talk to like dozens of sales leaders every single quarter, like all of us. And something I heard from everybody on this call was a real appetite to blend what has historically been considered maybe like demand gen or marketing owned activities with lead gen or historically sales owned activities, like blending the direct mail and the events approach. And it is something that has been a staple of my entire career. It is one of my most like favorite mindsets and strategy approaches to bring to clients. Very, very, very few folks are willing to bridge that silo. Like theoretically they are, but not with like the specific examples that I've heard from Robbie and that I've heard from George today. So I just think that's like a very cool theme to see come up, and a definite call out, because it is not the norm, but it is essential.
Well, and right. I want to touch on that. It's because we wanted to blame somebody else for us not hitting quota, rather than taking responsibility for or product or finance, instead of taking accountability for the entire go-to-market. Because if you are a true professional seller, it's from lead to bleed. And we've actually are now able to do that. That is what modern selling really is, in my opinion. It is all the go-to-market.
Mm-hmm. Right. Perfect transition. So the way forward, George, tell us the way forward, and then we'll all riff off of it.
Modern sellers, modern organizations that are going to win in the future, rather than sales meeting and marketing meeting and finance meeting and product meeting and customers meeting, bring them all together and define a go-to-market that takes all the stakeholders into account and give them some time at the table. Because the analogy I like to use, and we talked about it this week, remember when we would get some music back when you could take music and you'd make copies of it in the good old days, and they were like maybe cassettes, or maybe you would do a CD, or you'd rip it onto your computer. Every time that you make a copy of that, it degrades the content. And what happens is, if the product team isn't in, and I love the innovation review concept, I love that, Robbie. But if the product team isn't in there and then they hear about it later, they don't have that firsthand intel. And by the way, if they're good, they want to talk to customers. They want to talk to the sales rep. They want to understand what's resonating. So, I think we started talking about this probably 7 years ago with some of our larger enterprise customers, where I was like, why are we just talking to sales? Because we need to build demand. And then what's going on with your other why can't we have them in the meeting? It's like, I don't really even like those people. They just do arts and crafts, or our product is shit. That's why we're talking to you, because we need more product. And you're like, oh, well, I know what your problem is. You have an alignment problem. But then, and Steve knows this because I've told him numerous times, the thing I'm most afraid of is being a hypocrite. Now you got to actually walk that walk. But the good news is that everybody really does want to come to the table. And we're starting to see more and more organizations adopt that.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, alignment and the culture of everybody being focused on driving revenue and listening to the customer and that sort of stuff. Leslie, keep building off of what George is saying. Talk about the way forward.
The way forward, if we look at who's going to succeed in 2026, it is organizations who are building those buyer-centric sales processes. And I would say more specifically through the lens of AI, that they're being a little bit skeptical about how and where they use it, build it into their processes, because they are asking themselves this question: does this erode trust? And I think the question that's being asked right now is, does this seem like it makes my rep's life easier? Does it seem like it makes my reps, able to move faster, even though in reality, I don't find that that's always the case. But like, the perception right now is the most important use of AI is to go faster. And in 2026, the organizations that will win are the ones that ask themselves, how can I apply AI? How can I build sales processes, buying processes that don't erode trust? Because without trust, which is the true foundation of all selling, they're not going to be able to drive revenue.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Robbie, take us home.
Macro and micro is the way I'm thinking about this. At a macro level, it's sad that George's concept isn't the norm, because that's what moves the needle. I couldn't agree with him more. And I relate a lot to what you're talking about, because I'm doing the same thing you are right now, George, with the concept of growing something new in an international market. And the way that these types of organizations succeed is through alignment. And you get into bureaucracy and all the things that remove that thing that's actually going to move the business forward, which is unfortunate. So I 100% agree with that. And I think at a high level, to Leslie's point there, when we talk about AI, it's such a massive topic that people, there's so much coming at people right now. And whether it's revenue, whether it's ops, whether it's finance, I don't care where it is within the business, is, the one thing I will say is align to business outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And I don't care what department that's in. So at a more, again, macro level, that's the key to all of it, is if you can align to the tactics that you have from an outcome perspective for the upcoming year, and then you apply, whether it's automation or data and analytics or software integrations, whatever it is, it might not need to be AI. So just to leave that out there, I think the thing from a tactical level is everybody needs to do what George is doing. Everybody needs to be more like George. Call out your own bullshit.
No one's ever said that.
You're welcome, dude. Okay? Your wisdom is imparted upon us, and I couldn't agree with it more. When you're growing something, you get nobody to blame, whether it's good or bad. The concept of extreme ownership, and our buddy Jocko there, it's your fault, good or bad. And if you sit down and you that's the wrong word. You critically look through what you're doing every day, and then what you're doing over the last month. How many of those activities that are those activities you're doing are either generating new opportunities or moving existing ones through the pipe? And if you can be critical about yourself and be like, okay, why am I going for beers on a Tuesday with my buddy from grade 10? You know what I mean? Like, if you can be very judgmental on what you're actually putting your effort into, and then take those out of your calendar moving forward and only apply a weekly plan / scorecard into what you're doing every day. And if it's not hitting either one of those two things, new or moving it along the pipe, remove it. you're not going to move the needle and you're not going to generate opportunities if you aren't going and actually focusing on those RGAs, revenue generating activities. So like that to me at a micro and macro level are the big things moving into this upcoming year. And that's not like what I said at a micro level, that's not new. That's just an affirmation or a reaffirmation and a reminder that, you are in control of it, right? And if you're critical and you actually look through it and are definitive on yes and no's and then apply more to the yeses, you're going to get wins moving into 2026 off of all the things that we've talked about here today. This is a very intelligent conversation that I think people should take a lot from.
Yeah.
One item, Steve, to tie back what Robbie just said is why 80-20 is the rule.
Right.
Because at any one point in time, the 20 that are performing are the ones that are focused on RGA. And the 80 that aren't, they have to have that critical lens. And the problem is we all don't knock it out of the park all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, accountability is ultimately a performance driver for any profession. And if you don't have your personal accountability dialed in, you're not going to be a great seller. You're not going to be a great engineer. You're not going to be like anything. No. And, I'm a big believer, anybody that's been listening to this podcast, about a weekly scorecard driving, the things that move the business forward. And then, being very, very upfront. Do we have an issue? Is this a miss? And we need to solve for it right away, because otherwise we're going to be missing our goals for the week, for the month, for the year, for the quarter, that sort of thing. Right. And just really unpack it. So there is a lot for listeners to unpack here. But if I was going to put a theme into this, as sellers, we have more tools, more insights, more intelligence than we ever have had. And at the same time, you could say that there's never been a greater need for us to be humans and to show up with understanding, with empathy, and actually build relationships that's going to move the needle forward for the buyer, for the person we're selling to. And so at the end of the day, that is our job, as sellers, is to be people that listen, that understand, and that create solutions that make our buyers' jobs easier. And we've gone through a lot of stuff that we can unpack and everybody can listen to, but that's the end of the day. That's what we need to do as sellers, and people need to just remember that. And there's multiple ways to do it. Let's get after it, and let's have a great 2026. Thank you all for your insights today, and we'll see you all soon. I really appreciate the insights that we just heard from 3 seasoned professional sellers with a wide background of industry experience. And as I reflect on that for the audience and the folks that we at Roadmap serve, the traditional B2B sellers that sell to channels, how do these different things we uncovered, apply? And when I reflect on that, it really does come down to designing a sales process that meets the needs of your buyers. So you can take this conversation, you can think, well, geez, if I'm talking to my dealer network, how do I go out and prospect them, and how do I have a gated sales process and all that sort of stuff? It's like you really need to design it from a human perspective and have the accountability in place in your selling process that lines up with the buying process. And so the lessons are universal, but it has to get distinct to the industry that you're in. And so apply the universal lessons down to distinctly your industry, your buying group, your verticals, and win accordingly in 2026. You can probably hear snowblowers outside my window.
It is 88 degrees Fahrenheit in my office right now.
Oh my
gosh. It's
gosh.
so hot. I'm probably sweating.
Are you bragging? Sorry. I had a helicopter outside my window. I'm right on the bay here. So we've got all sorts of background noise. And the guy wanted to do a turn down and he wouldn't stop knocking on the friggin' door. So I
is that what happened?
We should hire him as a sales rep. He wouldn't take no.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you've heard, go to weareroadmap.com/podcast and download the Revenue Factory Toolkit in which you will receive mathematical models and a framework for building your go-to-market system. Also, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, with new episodes dropping the first and third Wednesday of every month. I'm Steve Whittington. Thanks for listening. Keep building your revenue factory one brick at a time.